Youth pastors, have you been struggling to stay in youth ministry? Ready to hang it up? Don't quit just yet. This interview could rekindle your passion for youth and challenge you to persist in your calling. Hey, youth pastors, Paul Turner here from thediscipleproject.net. And if you're new to this channel and you like youth ministry games, lessons, and interviews, youth pastor advice, then I invite you to subscribe. Today, I bring you an interview with longtime youth pastor and host of the Longer Haul podcast, Jody Livingston. Jody's written a new book called Staying Power, 10 Essentials for Longevity in Youth Ministry, and we break down some of the principles that could give you the staying power you need right now. All the links will be below for all the stuff we talked about, and if you're interested in more interviews, I have a playlist of over 80 interviews. I'll put a link below to that playlist and to the audio podcast in the description below. But thanks again for joining me today. Let's get on with the show.
This is the worst thing, one of the worst things I've ever done in youth ministry. Are we recording right now?
We are. I won't put it though. I won't
No,
put
that's
it
fine.
there.
Use it. Put it on the front. Okay, put it on the front. I would do not do this. Okay. So if you use this and anybody's listening, don't do this. I was literally telling the story the other night. We took a kid to camp one year. He was a cousin of somebody, a kid in our youth group. And his kid was a pain. I mean, all week. I could tell you stories. It doesn't matter. Should have sent him home. Didn't know better because I'm like 19. And I'm like, we can't send a kid home. This kid really needs Jesus. That sounds so spiritual. Now I'm old enough to know, no, he's ruining it for everyone else. Just anyway, I was so fed up with this kid. It was an 8-hour drive back, and I'd be borrowed my pastor's station wagon, okay, because we didn't have a church van, small church, and we're driving back, and this kid for 8 hours just running his mouth the whole time. Everybody was done, and we get about a mile from the church, and I just pull over and I say, "Get out! You're walking the rest of the way." And he's like, "What? You can't make me?" I was like, "Oh, I can. Get out of the car." And sure enough, he got out, and I drove off and went to the church, and we unpacked and got everybody out, and eventually he made his way there and put him in his car and sent him home, and I did not get fired, but I should have.
I thought this story was going where you were gonna make him walk to the retreat or walk to camp. I thought this was the
Oh
trip.
no,
I thought there was the trip there, not the trip back. I was like,
this is
oh
the way
wow.
home. This is the way home. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't blame you.
yeah. No, it
I did make.
started. It
Go ahead.
started on the way there, man. In fact, I know we're going to talk about the book a little bit. I make a reference to in the introduction a little bit about kids who buy the weird flavor of beef jerky that you tell them not to. That was the kid. That was the kid.
Oh yeah, he wanted alligator.
Yeah, he some alien
Alligator.
jerky, whatever that is. Yeah, I don't know.
It's not good.
It
Whatever
did not
that is.
end well for him going or returning.
No,
So for
no.
different reasons, obviously, because I didn't
Obviously,
stop.
of course, of course. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Jody Livingston, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, thanks for having me, my friend.
I'm
Always
ex-
good to be around.
yeah, I'm excited to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. We were joking a little beforehand. I feel like 26 years in, I'm usually the old guy,
Mm.
but I'm just a young buck in this conversation. I would have been in your youth group.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. It makes me
Yeah,
feel so much better about my life, Jody.
that's all right.
Uh,
Might have been the kid you kicked out. That's what I said.
it may
It's
have been. I told you
yeah,
I have done that. I've given a few kids a vacation, by the way. You know, it's okay.
yeah.
Speaking of that, you are on vacation, so I want to thank you for
I
your
am.
time.
No, thanks for having me
Um,
here.
and you got a great book out, and we're going to talk about that. But I'm going to pose to you the question that I give most guests because I feel like it's a credibility issue, a credibility issue that if I put you in a room, if you say, and you can do this either past, present, however you choose to do it, but if you're the volunteer of the youth group and the youth pastor is running late and you're in a room full of middle school students, how do you keep them entertained?
Yeah.
Either, and once again, it could be a game, it could be something completely different. But what do you do with them for that 15 or 20 minutes until the youth pastor arrives?
Well, some of it's going to depend on the room, right? So if
Sure,
I'm in an
sure.
open room, I'm
Yeah.
going my old school, my favorite back pocket game. This is my go-to. I'm going to play a game called Clumps. Okay, classic youth ministry game, and essentially you're just going to call a number, and they
Hmm.
have to group in that number of people. And if they miss, if I say five and somebody's odd man out or odd girl out, then they're out and they're done. They're going to go sit down. One, everybody gets away from each other. Sometimes they like to cheat a bit.
Yeah.
And then three, they get in groups of three. So you do a couple practice rounds. That game will go forever. I mean, it'll send you to the hospital, but for the most part, that's an easy on the fly kind of game. Now, if I'm in a smaller room where we can't run around a bunch, maybe we're going to do some type of story. We're going to do some questions, some would you rather, those kind of things. But every good youth pastor ought to have some go tos in his pocket for sure, because you're going to break down on the side of the road at some point, and you're going to need to entertain for a bit. But
Sure.
clumps and would you rather, those are easy peasy, easy pickings.
So yeah, talking about today's youth pastors, normally, I feel like they are not using clumps. I feel like clumps
Yeah,
is an underrated game. I feel
for
like
sure.
they're tapping, they're doing these TikTok chat, which I do them as well. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
shade on that. I'm just saying we grew up in an age, as far as youth pastors, where we actually had to look at a book. We had
yeah,
to like look through a book of ideas. Maybe,
yeah,
if you those of you that are old enough to remember youth specialties, that was
yeah.
they
The
produced a lot.
ideas library,
Absolutely.
library thing.
Absolutely. And
I think so. Here's what I'll say. I mean, use what you know, right? So if if you're there and that's the world you're living in, so obviously your kids are familiar with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I do think you need to have something that doesn't rely on a phone, technology, or service, because regardless, you should always have a couple things to pull out. I really find, Paul, I don't know about you, and this look, I mean, we use technology like crazy in our student ministry. We're not afraid of it by any
right.
means.
Right.
But I find that when I go routes that don't use technology, it's such a foreign thing for a lot of our students that
Hmm.
it really becomes refreshing, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think if they're stuck at home and bored, they're going to probably run to TikTok,
Hmm.
and that's fine. So let me give them something that's different than what they could do if I wasn't. Now I'm here. Let's do something different that you could do at home. Um, and so I don't know. There's a Now I'm not plugging this at all, but I have a backpocket games book, like a PDF,
Hmm.
that I occasionally give away through the longer haul just to have, because of the very thing you're talking about. Like, oh gosh, the bus broke down, we're running late, the power went out. This happened to us a few months ago. The power went out. Okay, what are we going to do now? Like, okay, well, you go with what you know. And so if you know some games, and you pull them out, or you're on a mission trip somewhere and it's hurry up and wait, and you get there and the bus doesn't show up yet, or you thought you were leaving, now you're not. You're at a school or an orphanage somewhere. Okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to play? Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great question to lead with.
Sure. Well, thank you. I'll put a link down below, by the way, if you would like these back pocket games.
Yeah,
Go get
for
them.
sure.
They're over there. I mean, they're free, right?
Yeah,
You go get
yeah,
them.
totally.
And it's, at the time of this recording, it's summertime. And of course, you might be in camp or other places. And you might need this kind of resource. Where, by the way, these come in handy, which, by the way, when you don't have cell service, I don't know
Yeah,
if you've been there, and you no
no,
longer have access to the TikTok. And I know I sound like an old man yelling at clouds, the TikTok, but you got to have something. You got to have some sort of maybe physical thing that you could look through, a note of some kind that you could have. And I've done the same thing, Jody. In
yeah,
Sunday school lately, I've been handing out clipboards with a worksheet and a
yeah,
pen, and say, we're going to work through this together. I'm
hmm,
teaching them this anachronistic skill.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe when the EMP goes off, or something, and that
right.
they're stuck.
Yeah,
They know how to write and stuff.
I love it. I love it. Hey, and yeah, penmanship is a lost art for sure.
That's right. This is to me, I just see it as preparation. We're just a bunch of preppers. I'm just
That's Now we do sound old. Now we
Yeah,
do
that's
sound
right.
old.
That's right. Exactly. That's right.
So fun.
You're not in a hotel room. You're in a bunker, aren't you?
That's right. It's a really nice one. It's a really nice one.
We're both in our bunkers talking. Well, let's talk a little bit about the fact that we've already mentioned that I am old and you are quickly becoming old.
Yeah.
And how long? Tell everybody a little bit about your journey of youth mission. Where and when did that start? As far as when you kind of
Yeah.
started to get into it, and tell us about that.
So this is my, I think, 26th year in student ministry. Um, I had planned on being an architect growing up. I loved to draw and paint, and I wanted to make money, and that seemed like a way to draw and make money. And then my senior year of high school, my drafting teacher told me that I suck at math and architects need to know math, which ironically, I don't think you do anymore. I think the computer maybe does that for you.
Yeah.
Um, so that was kind of a, oh no, what am I going to do with my life? And then my best friend died in a car accident. And that left me kind of spinning a bit in my faith and, or the lack of at that time in my life. I'd kind of fallen out of church um, and honestly, we can talk about this in a bit too. I had a smaller church. We didn't have like a full-time youth pastor. We couldn't afford that, which is fine. But we had people who would kind of work with the youth, right? And it was just a revolving door. There was never a consistent somebody who stuck around and really poured into me or us. And I think that definitely affected me in high school over my lack of involvement in that. So yeah, my senior year, I'm back in church trying to figure out what I'm doing. And I remember sitting in the service one day watching my pastor, kind of preaching a sermon, and thinking, I think that's what I want to do with my life. And I had been invited to a prayer group that a few students had started that met before school. And I didn't want to go. I was really angry. And they just kept inviting. And so I kind of went and said, okay, I'll go if you don't ask me anymore. And so they said, sure. Okay. So my friend Alicia Davis was her name. And I went and I sat in there and there's 8, 9, 10 kids, not a ton, and just listened to them pray for the school and students of the school, the teachers of school, and me. And man, I don't know what happened, but something happened. And so I went back and then I just kept going back. And just like a teenager would, that's after a little bit, they said, hey, I don't know if you've noticed, Jody, we all kind of take turns leading a devotion, and we love that you're coming, but if you're going to keep coming, you're going to have to take a turn and lead a devotion. And I didn't want to get kicked out of prayer group, so
You got to
like,
pull your
okay,
weight.
yeah, that's right. So I'm like, oh gosh, I can't get kicked out of prayer group. So I don't even know what it was. It was something from the book of Isaiah. I stayed up all night on it, working on this little 5-minute devotion. Don't remember a thing I said. I just remember giving that little devotion and feeling for the first time in my whole life, something in me just come alive. Right. And then maybe a week later, I'm sitting in that church going, that's what I want to do with my life. Thought I was going to do full-time evangelism, and because I just love to preach. Had a retired pastor in my church, and then my pastor really started mentoring me, showing me kind of how to study, how to put together a message. This little church in East Tennessee, and I'm preaching once a month on a Sunday night to our church, and it's bad, but they don't care because I'm, 17, and they're just excited. And then ended up going to Bible college. I didn't know that was a thing. My pastor kind of pushed me that way. Last minute, ended up going, got to Bible college, got invited into this team that would kind of travel and speak at different events that churches needed. And I was always getting sent to the students. I was really annoyed because I thought they were sending me to the teens because I was the youngest guy on the team and they didn't want to go deal with the teenagers. But I was grateful for the opportunity. End of the year comes, it's May. I don't want to move. I don't want to go back home because there's nothing really for me there. And had a friend on that team who said, hey, I know a pastor looking for a youth pastor, somebody to volunteer at their church. Great, I'll do it. No, didn't even think about it. This church was 50 people on a high attendance Sunday when everybody brought a friend, and there's, a potluck after and gospel singing. Like that's 50 people all told,
That's big. That's big.
right? And so probably 4 kids in the youth group when we started. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not getting paid but I'm 18 years old and I'm a youth pastor. Kid in my youth group 6 months younger than me, which I didn't think anything of at the time, but now is super weird because he's still 6 months younger than me, and he was in my youth group. Yeah, and man, I just think if it sounded fun, we did it. To me, we did 6 lock-ins that first year, and because I loved lock-ins because I was 18 and like sleeps, I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of thing. And that little youth group of 4 became 10, became 15, became 20, whatever. And so I was there for a couple of years. The church decided to merge with another small church in the area, and they didn't need 2 youth pastors. My pastor at that time was also going overseas to do missions. So it was kind of a season of transition. I stepped away from that at that point, and then jumped into another spot a little bit later, part-time again. This time I was paid, and that was helpful. And did that for 8 years there. First youth pastor, nobody there. For 3 months, my wife and I would show up to nobody. We would just pray for kids who would come one day. And 8 years later, we're leaving a youth group of 45. I was at Youth and Kids and Children's Ministry, 100 and something. And moved to the Atlanta area to be full-time. I had arrived, so full-time youth pastor. Was there for 9 years and loved it. And then about 6.5 years ago, we came to Southern California, where I currently am, and did student ministry there for one of the campuses at a multi-site church, and then kind of moved into more of a global role, kind of mentoring, overseeing student ministry, and then young adults became a part of that, and then I run at parenting. So I'm running at parenting and young adults, and yeah, I'm still pouring in. Have a podcast that we met through the Longer Haul, and obviously a book now, but still running at it. For a long time, Paul, I would tell people that God kind of turned my heart towards students in that early season. But I think somewhere along the way, I realized that my heart was always towards students. I just was one. And part of that is the end of my senior year, the National Day of Prayer, we convinced our principal to let us do a student-led assembly during homeroom. And he was a believer, and so he let us do it. And no one wants to be in class. Everybody comes to the gym. And we just shared testimony, and then I presented the gospel and watched like 20 or 30 of my classmates give their life to Christ. And that was it, man. I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to do this forever. And I'm still thinking evangelism, right? And I think the Lord the whole time was saying, no, next generation, man, next generation. And so here I am still doing it until they tell me, until they kick me out. And it's been a ride for sure.
Well, I think then your book is aptly titled Staying Power.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's it would be something if you did your Longer Haul podcast and it lasted a year or
Yeah.
or something. So
Yeah.
I think both your podcast and your book are testament, let alone your life, of the staying power that you have had in youth ministry. And that's what you talk a lot about in the book. It's staying power, 10 essentials for longevity in youth ministry. Did you think you'd be in youth ministry this long?
I think I did. I've had a lot of opportunities, and I say this with humility and almost like I've been asked a lot about doing other ministry, like
Yeah.
being a senior pastor somewhere or stepping into a different type of role. And we've done some combo things, right? Like students and college, students and young adults, kids and students. Student ministry has been kind of the theme there, the one consistent theme for it. And I just have never really had interest in doing those other things. And I don't, like, I'll say this too. I think youth pastors make incredible senior pastors. I think they do because because when you've done student ministry, you've managed volunteers, you've handled budgets, you've dealt with parents, you've dealt with difficulty, you've taught probably more than your senior pastor has because you're probably teaching more times, a year. You've led trips, you've led mission trips, you've done camps and retreats and events. And I mean, you've really done it. You've probably built a website. You certainly managed the social media for the church because nobody else could. You know how to run sound, although you don't want anybody to know you do. You know three chords, and you have a capo. I mean, like, you're really well versed and prepared. There's a lot to learn to step into a new role. I'm not saying that. But I do think that just because you would make a great senior pastor doesn't mean you should be one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that to be true as well, because, there's the old adage of people coming up to you and says, it's not said today in this way, but it's like, when are you going to become a real pastor? That's how they
Oh, I
used to
hear
say
it.
it.
Yeah.
Now, if you say that today, you are canceled.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're canceling you. You
Yeah.
can't say that to somebody. When are you going to be a real
Yeah.
pastor? What are you talking about? And then you have too, where, maybe you get to preach in church, and then some of the adults come up to you and go, you should preach more often. And you
Yeah,
try
of
to,
course.
and you have to deflect. If you buy all the, if you if you buy into all the things that are said to you,
Yep.
that could lead to, bad choices, maybe, I don't know. But you can't believe all your press clippings, so to speak. You can't.
No,
The
no,
congregation comes to you and says, you should do that more often. Well, that's not necessarily a signal that you should lead
no.
youth ministry. I mean,
Well, and here's the thing, Paul. Like, if they heard you every week, they would be saying that to someone else, right? If they heard you preach or me preach, I don't care how great I am, or they are, like, or you are. If someone heard you week in and week out, they would be. It's not that they don't like you, but something different is refreshing, right? At times, and so and you're probably not as great as you think you are, but you're not as bad as you think you are either. And so, I think, how do you manage that? And then here's where this is, and I do talk about this in the book. Here's where it becomes really important in moments like that. We have to be really careful that we don't stand at the gate in those moments and undermine those in leadership above us, right? And what I mean by that, because I don't want to make assumptions, is if you're familiar with the story of First and Second Samuel, Absalom, David's son, goes to stand at the gate, and the Bible says that he won the hearts of the people away from David. And so when you and I are in those moments, and people are like giving us praise at the expense of those in leadership, whether or not you like the person you're under or not is irrelevant in that moment. You can't stand at the gate. You even I will say this: sometimes you follow someone who wasn't great. You're right. So there was a youth pastor, you come in, everything's being compared. You're being compared or contrasted or criticized against the person before you. It doesn't do you any good to speak ill of the person that you've followed. What is it? It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't make you look better at all. And so how do we then be mindful of that, like, and say things like, man, you know what? Thank you so much. I really appreciate your encouragement. It means so much to me. But if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have even have the opportunity that I have. And I'm just so grateful. I'm just so grateful to be able to serve alongside them and have these opportunities. Right? Like, how do I encourage those above me rather than stand at the gate and be like, well, you should tell them. And maybe I'll get to preach more often, but or you can say, you know what, you can count on it. I'll preach every week after Christmas and at least once in the summer while my pastor's on vacation.
that's right. Be here on those Sundays.
Yeah, yeah,
And right, because I'm like, with age comes wisdom, right? And you've said, when you get those questions, you hear those things. That's, you almost identify it, and it's not meant to be that way, but it's almost the voice of the enemy that's trying
yeah,
to get in your head. It's like, oh, this praise or things like that, and you want to say, and partly, like you said, it's kind of just like, hey, it's about deflection. It's
yeah,
about saying, look, it's not about me. First of all, you may not want to hear me every week. Look, I had
yeah,
one good message. This
yeah.
is
I've
it.
been working on this message for 6 months.
That's
You
right.
know,
That's right. Come back in another 6 months. I might have another good message. Okay. The quality may not be there every week, and you may not want to hear what I have to say every week. And
Yeah,
usually it's kinder, older people too that will say some of these things who have
yeah,
been in the church 20 years, heard the same
yeah.
preacher, all those things. And so you have to moderate some of those
You know
things.
what's a great comeback to that, and this is what I started saying a while ago. Man, I thank you so much. I love that's so encouraging to me. If you wanted to hear me teach more often, you could volunteer on Wednesday nights with us, and you'd get to hear me every week.
There you go.
And I find they don't want to hear me that much.
Yeah. Do you ever say you can listen to my podcast?
No, I don't. Most people, I don't even tell most people I have a
You tell them,
podcast.
hey, you'll hear me every week. Just be sure to
Yeah,
sign up for the
just
newsletter.
go. Yeah, just head over
Hear
to
from me all the time.
longerhaul.com. You can hear me all the time.
You
I
can
do
hear me
use it
all-
as a volunteer pitch, though, like crazy. And most of the time, then I find out if they really want to hear me or not. How bad do they really want to hear my preaching?
Yeah. Yeah. Not that bad. Not
Not
that
that
bad.
bad.
In most
No.
cases. In most cases. There's a
They
rare
usually give me
case.
oh, well, I'll pray about that.
Yeah. Which is Christianese for no. No, I would
No,
never do that.
that's never going to happen. Thank you,
So
though.
I'm gonna pray about it. Not really, but I'm just letting you know it's just not gonna happen.
I love that.
So what would you then accredit then? You got 26 years in, you're
Yeah.
but a child, and you're 26 years in, and you reflect as you're probably writing this book, and you're saying, okay, what are the keys here? What has really kept me in it, the passionate part of that? And if you just want to share, you can
Yeah.
share whichever ones you think come to mind. They said, okay, that was
Yeah.
probably a big one there that said, I'm gonna, there's a lot of reasons youth pastors can stay. You can stay for the kids, you can stay for the church, you can stay because whatever. But you're saying thinking
Not for the money. You're not staying for the money.
you're not staying for the money. That's off the table. But yeah, but you're saying, okay, so what is the part that speaks to you the loudest? Uh,
Yeah.
you're in the staying power.
I think for me, so it's interesting. And I in the book I kind of share a little bit off the front end. I think when I think of my podcast, I think when I think of this book, I think, and I'm sure you're the same, Paul. Everything I'm saying and writing is to 18-year-old Jody, right? I'm writing to 18-year-old me. It's all of the things that I wish someone had told me or that I could have known then that I didn't know that I know now. And so it really is kind of an inventory. In many ways, it's a checklist, right? I'm going down this checklist and hopefully things that I revisit often. I start at the very first chapter with this idea of being certain of your salvation. I think it's easy to skim past that, and most people do. But what I've learned is if you do this long enough, you're going to be at a camp or a conference or chapel service somewhere, and you're going to watch a youth pastor get saved. And that's crazy. Like, what have you been doing? And so it really is like we need to start with there. Let's not make any assumptions there. And then for me, probably most of it, the most significant thing for me comes down to calling. I just think it's I talk a little bit about this when I decided, I shared a little bit a moment ago, when I went to my pastor and said, "Hey, I want to do what you want to do," he said no. And I was offended. I thought, man, I'm paying this guy the biggest compliment of his life. I can't remember a single person who, in my whole life, who from this church who felt called to ministry. And here I am sitting across his desk in this musty old office in the basement, telling him I want to be him when I grow up. And he said, no. Like, what is wrong with this guy? And then he said this. He said, listen, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take some time on this. I want you to go and I really want you to pray and seek the Lord. And when you can do nothing else and be obedient to the Lord and fulfilled in what he would have you do, then you come back and talk to me. And I did that. I mean, I really took that serious. And so by the time when I came back and said, no, this is it, he said, okay, then let's get to work. And that's when the mentoring started happening. And that one conversation that one thing. His words literally to me were, "You need to run from this." And I was like, what in the world is going on? Like, I suck at math. Now I can't do this. Like, but I'm telling you, that conversation, Paul, that conversation has saved me and my ministry more times than I could count, because there have been plenty of days where I sit and daydream about flipping burgers someplace, and or having a job where I just show up and get to go home at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and not have to worry about it until I come back the next day. Or don't have to worry about my phone ringing at 2 in the morning because there's been a crisis, or one of my, I've got a student who's, been in a car accident or a suicide thing that we're walking through, or like, no, man, there's plenty of days where the criticism feels louder than the compliments, and I don't feel qualified to be in this role, and I'm doubting every decision I have. And I go back to that conversation and I think, yeah, but this is what God's called me to do. And until that changes, and I don't think it has, and it's the words of Peter, right? Where else would I go? Like, you alone have the words of life. You
Yeah,
alone
yeah,
have
yeah.
everything I need. This is where you've placed me and called me. And that is challenging, because at 18, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was just doing stupid stuff to get kids to youth group. And I was so arrogantly passionate about seeing them come to Jesus. And and then I got married, and that changed things. My wife was involved even at 18. We were dating at the time she was there, but our my marriage changed things. Then I had kids who became mascots in the ministry, and now I'm feeling very divided. And I see a lot of folks step away there. And I'm so glad I didn't. I mean, my kids grew up going to camp, and right now I've got a daughter who's working at camp back in North Carolina, and she never actually went to that camp as a camper. We moved to California before then, but she grew up going at 6 months old. She was tagging along. My oldest, who's 22, just got back from a mission trip, and where she spent a few weeks in Europe. At 10 years old, she was tagging along to mission trips to El Salvador. Like, they've watched us do that. um, and now I'm launching them out into the world. I'm older. I don't, um, I, at 18, I didn't want to talk to parents. I thought they were the problem. At, 25, I was a parent. I felt comfortable with parents, but I'd rather hang out with the student. Now in my mid 40s, man, throw me in a room of parents. I love it. Like, let me sit down with a parent and help them walk through something. Throw me in a room of volunteers. I love that. I can hang out with teenagers, and I love them still. But if it's like a middle school dance and the parents are on one side and the teenagers are on the other, I'm probably going to parents now, where 26 years ago, I'd have ran as fast as I could to go hang out with teenagers. And so as you start to change, your perspective change, your experience change, life brings change. It's easy in some of those moments to start going, man, I don't know if this is what I should be doing anymore, because I don't do it the same as I used to. I think that's okay, right? And so that's where calling is like, no, 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 no. He didn't tell me what the calling looked like. He just said, this is what I was called to do. California was never on my bingo card, right? Like, I grew up in the South, um, but our yes was on the table, and he was going to put that on the map, and this is where it brought us. And so, how do we run in faithfulness towards that calling? I think that's the question we all have to ask: is what is God's call in my life, and am I being obedient and faithful to that?
Yeah, and I'm sure that the calling was tested throughout the past 26 years. There's times where you want to, look, in my world, it's like I'm the little old man bagging groceries. I'm
Yeah,
I'm that guy. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
like quietly just got I'm like, you see those guys in the grocery store where like, I wonder if that's a youth pastor. Like, could that be a
yeah.
youth pastor that just said, I'm done,
I'm
and now
done.
he's double bagging my frozen goods? That could be me.
Yeah,
That could be
yeah,
me. And in the book too, by the way, having the first chapter talk about salvation, bold move, Cotton, bold move.
yeah,
And one of the line that I drew from that says the truth is this: God must be the active agent in your ministry or nothing you do will matter.
Yeah.
Unpack that
Yeah.
for a second.
Well, this will sound sacrilegious, but I'm convinced of it. You can do youth ministry for 2 years without Jesus. Like I just think, especially today, right? Like you can buy enough messages online, which you shouldn't be doing, my opinion, write your own. You can buy enough games online, which you should be doing unless you would like to make up your own, right? Like you can outsource so much of your ministry, and it really takes a couple of years for you to be known and for you to really know where you're at. And so you can kind of fake it for a couple of years. Things really start getting serious around that 2 year mark. I think that's why a lot of youth pastors leave around 2.5 years, because that's when the wheels fall off, right? Somewhere around 2.5 to 3 years, it's going to get crazy hard. And you're going to have you're probably going to have an opportunity to leave, and you're going to have a lot of people encouraging you to leave, and you're going to start looking around saying, it's the church's fault, it's the pastor's fault, it's the parents' fault, it's the students' fault, it's the city's fault, it's the this, and the reality is, you just you weren't committed from the start. You walked in and you've been peddling a message that you didn't know. You didn't own. What you've done has not been an overflow of your own life. It's been pragmatically doing things that you thought would advance and grow the ministry, not necessarily build disciples. And if God's not doing it, then it's never going to last, because you're going to leave. Somebody else is going to come in. They're going to undo everything you did, start over. The kids who loved you are going to leave. Kids who hated you are going to stay. You'll go somewhere else and you'll do the same games, teach the same messages, do the same things for all your retreats. It's rinse and repeat. And you and I know this, Paul. I'll talk to youth pastors. And listen, if this is you, please hear me. I'm not trying to throw shade at you, but I do want to expose a bit and say, if you tell me you have 10 years of youth ministry experience and we start looking at that resume and it's really just 2 years over and over and over again, what you really have is 2 years of youth ministry experience, because you're going to grow most. You will grow. And you tell me what you think about this, Paul. I'm convinced that you grow more in your capacity as a minister, and in your faith for that matter, and certainly in your ability to lead, in from year 3 to year 5 than you will do in any other phase of your ministry. I just think the first 2 years don't require much of you, and year 3 to year 5 require everything of you.
Well, I
And
think
that's
too.
where, if God's not that active agent, you're gonna melt.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it takes 2 years to run out of all the tricks, right? Everything you
Yep.
saw, if you grew up in youth group, you've done everything you've seen your youth pastor do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have emulated it. You've preached all their messages. You have played all their games. And when the well goes dry around that 2.5 year mark, and you get around year 3, the kids are wondering what's next. And you're
Yep.
like, I'm what does the internet say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and it just gets hard. It gets really hard in that season. And so, and this is in the book as well. Like, I'm telling you right now, if you're listening to this and you're not yet to year 3, circle it on your calendar. It's coming. I don't know what it's going to be, right? I can tell you. I'll walk through what it was for me, because I know 2 years in, 2.5 years in, that first church I just told you, they decided to merge. Pastor left. That was it. I was out. Now, in that situation, there really was no place for me to stay, and that was okay. I was ready to move, and I loved it, loved where it was. I'm not, but you know, the second church that I was at, 2 years in, the pastor that hired me left. New pastor comes in, and it is, am I going to quit or get fired first? I mean, it was just, and then but I stayed, and we became amazing friends to this day, and saw some of the best, sweetest ministry I've ever known. But I could have left. No one would have questioned it, right? When I got to Georgia, first full-time role, right? I'm excited. Here I am, 2.5 years in, I had a major blow up with some volunteers, one of whom was the pastor's wife. And again, easy to leave, but we stayed, worked through it. and enjoyed just an incredible ministry there, fruitful ministry. 2 years in here, COVID happened, right? 2.5, I think it was about 2.5 years. COVID happens. That's enough said for everybody. We all know there. And so, like, I don't know what it's going to be for you, but I know it's going to happen. And here's the other thing: it's going to happen again and again and again every 2.5 to 3 years. But the longer you stay, the easier it becomes to navigate that and overcome it. I don't know why that pattern is there. I have no research yet to prove it,
Yeah.
but I know it's there.
Well, and I would say this too, on par with that, and only because I'm slightly older than you, and being 57 and being in a small rural church with about 7 or 8 kids,
Yeah,
that season there, that I would say every season is a season of grace.
yeah,
That you start to operate in ways. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into that youth room feeling more and more disqualified,
yeah, yeah,
more and more disqualified, just because of whether it's age or I've been here too long. That's a whole nother phase. We talk about seasons
yeah,
of ministry.
yeah,
You reach that phase, and then you have to retool again, or not even. I don't know if there's even retooling. It's not even about new ideas. It's not even about that. It's simply about the grace you receive in the moment. That these kids keep showing up, whether you're 57 or not, Paul.
yeah, yeah,
They're there. You have to let go and just
yeah,
show up because all they're asking of you is to show up.
yeah.
And
Well,
and
and here's the question we have to ask ourselves: well, if you were to sit down right now and take an inventory of all the things you're doing in your student ministry, how many of the things that you're doing could you do without Jesus?
mm,
Like, if he didn't show up, would it still happen? And I'm not, and there are things, right? Like, okay, well, I build the PowerPoint. Okay, great. You did the PowerPoint. If Jesus doesn't show up, the PowerPoint gets built. But it certainly would be better if he did, right? Like, if, let's talk about the PowerPoint that supports the message, right? In the planning of the game, in the counseling session, in the, like, where in your, and this, I think, is a danger on both ends of the spectrum. When you're first starting out, and you don't know what you don't know, you can run ahead of God, right? On the back end now, 26 years in, man, I've done this and done this and done this. I don't stress out over writing a message like I did 26 years ago. The temptation now is just to 20. I've taught it all, not all, but I've taught enough. I've taught a ton, right? Like, how easy is it to get lazy and to not walk and depend on the Lord to show up in my life? And I don't know, man. I'm just not I'm not content to just make it through. Like, if he doesn't show up, at this point in my life, if he doesn't show up, I don't think it's worth my time. Like, I want him to do things that I can't do. I want him to do things that only he could do in the lives of our students. I want to see, there's a Judges 2:10. Joshua has died there, and it says after him, and then after them, a generation arose that did not know the Lord or the things he had done. Man, I don't want that. Not on my watch, right? And that makes me angry. That makes me angry, right? I will not let that happen. And so it's not about the game. It's not about the message. It's not about the Instagram account or the TikTok account. It's not about the T-shirt design. It's not about the retreat theme. Those are but small things that all point to the thing. And how do I posture a kid's heart in such a way that they're willing and prepared to receive what God desperately wants to do in their life? I just need to get out of the way. And it can't be about me, It can't be about me. My character, my platform can't outgrow my character, or
yeah,
I'm in trouble. I'm in big
well,
trouble.
and unfortunately, this is not everybody listening or watching, by the way.
No, for sure.
There is a younger generation who does look at now platform has an entirely different context. It used to
Yeah,
be the church platform.
right.
Now it's the global platform or whatever platform you are doing ministry on, or some of those things. And so I would ask then, well, if you're now talking to some of you that are the folks that are out there whether they're in their second year, maybe they're in their second 2.5 years, or maybe they're a little bit further along, and they're, maybe they're thinking about all these things. And I think that you've already, and you may have to regurgitate or you may summate. I don't know, but they're thinking about these things. If they're listening to this, they're going, huh. I don't know if I really thought about that. I don't know if I really thought about whether I needed Jesus to do this ministry or not. I haven't thought about, what's going to happen after the 2.5 years when my bag of tricks is empty. But you got folks, because part of that is people just giving up. There's, I think it's still active. There's still a
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
hole for youth ministry where it's not being filled. There's a lot of guys who are just, they're out. They're doing something else. They've gone on or whatever they've done. So just tell them, if you could just say, hey, listen, if you and I think most people listening and watching want to stay. I think in their hearts they're
Yeah.
going, I believe God's called me to this. I believe I'm supposed to do this. But boy, is it so deadgum hard. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's rough. I don't know if I can make it or not. Talk to them now and just say, hey, man, here's the staying power part of this. Here's
Yeah.
where the rubber meets the road, and talk to those folks and walk them through that almost like your pastor did for you, and
Yeah.
say, hey,
Yeah.
what does that sound like then?
Yeah. Well, I think you've got to know that you're called, right? You got to know, well, you got to know you're saved. You got to know you're called. And I think if you can get there, you're ahead of most. Because a lot of us will jump into youth ministry because it looks fun, or we saw it when we were in youth group, and oh man, it just seemed like it was going to be super fun, and I want to do that. And then you get in there and you realize it's sort of fun. Most days are not. Most days are expensive, and sleepless nights, and frustrating, and full of criticism, and no one tells you those things. And so I think you've got to know that, and you've got to know that what you're doing matters, and that it is worth it, and that you're not. And can I be bold enough to even say you've got to be you've got to know who it matters to, right? Like, who are you doing it for? Is it the praise of parents? Is it the praise of elder people in your church? Is it the praise of your leadership and pastor? Listen, you should be above reproach with all those people. I'm not saying don't be mindful of them, but at the end of the day, I want to honor the Lord with my ministry. I want to honor the Lord with my life. I want to honor the Lord with my faithfulness. And so, what does that look like? I mean, there's things that keep you going. One of the things I talk about in the book is, which is not new. I mean, it's new. I'm finding it's new to a lot of people. Back when we were kind of getting started, this was a common encouragement. Like, you need to have an encouragement file in your. I have a physical one in my office, and then I have a digital one. So with screenshots of text messages or emails go there. Any note cards that come in, thank you cards, they go in there because listen, they do not come often. And the days that I feel like quitting, that's my first stop, right? Let me pull those out and start reading through those and be reminded of the difference that I am making on days it feels like I'm not. And I think just even the recognition of the seasons that we were talking about, not every season is a difficult one. Man, year 5 is a great season. Year 5 is a phenomenal season. Um, 7 is fun. You're recasting vision. I mean, those are good seasons. Just as in your time in of ministry, you only get better at what you're doing by doing it. So the longer you're in this thing, the better you get at doing it and at being a youth pastor, navigating some of the challenges. The wiser you become. I don't feel the need now to suddenly have every answer. I don't know. Let's figure it out together. Let's talk through it. The amount of questions that I answer with a maybe, maybe not would frustrate 18-year-old Jody to no end, right? Like, it would just, he would be so mad at me. Maybe, maybe not. Just make a decision, Jody. It's like, I don't know. What are your expectations of that? Let me tell you what ours are. Does that seem like that makes sense? I think the other thing for me is I want to always have the long haul, no pun intended. I want the longer haul in mind. I'm not serving, it's not about today, it's about 5 years from now. 10 years from now? How am I building what I'm doing now in a durable way that will outlast me? Um, you need community, you need folks around you, you need friends, and you can make friends in your church. I don't care what anybody says, but you need friends in your church, friends outside of your church. Find a mentor, a coach. It will not be your senior pastor, and that's okay. But you can't do it alone. There's Here's the side note. I hear youth pastors, younger youth pastors all the time, who want mentors and are frustrated because they can't find one. And yet I'm often finding that those same people that are so desperate for mentors are unwilling to read. And so, like, here's something that maybe people haven't thought about. We're obviously talking about this book that I wrote, right? You could probably read this book in a day if you sat down and read it, I think. But it took me 3 years to write. If you and I had if someone listening said, "Hey, Jody, can I spend the day with you?" Sure. And we hung out all day. I could not remotely tell you all the things that you can learn from reading this book, because this is 3 years of me thinking through this life. And our world is filled with books that you can learn from and lean into. And so go find mentors. If you can't find a physical mentor, if you're in a really rural area where there's not a lot of other youth pastors around or don't have access, listen. You're obviously listening to this podcast, you're watching this. Like, Paul is a mentor to you from a distance. This guy's done it forever. Like, he knows what you don't yet know. Let him mentor you through the podcast. Go read some good books on student ministry and learn. Be in the word. Be mentored by Jesus, even. And how does Jesus approach situations? How does he handle criticism? How does he teach through story? How does he point back and keep the central message of the gospel at the focus and not just make it some pragmatic, here's how to be a better you this week? Those are all things I think that you can learn. And then recognize you don't know what you don't know, and that's okay. That you'll get there when you get there. But I have a rule. My best friend and I talk about this a lot. And I would tell our team this: you can quit once a day. Okay, you're allowed to quit once a day, only once, and you can't leave until the end of your day. Okay, so you can quit anytime you want, but you got to stay the rest of the day. And then tomorrow, when you come back to work, that resets. And if you want to quit tomorrow again, you can again. But you also have to stay to the end of the day that day. You get one I quit a day. And sometimes I cheat and I have more than one of those, but I just don't tell anybody about the second one.
No, I tell Jesus about the second one and the third
Yeah.
and the fourth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Why am I doing this?
that's right.
Yeah. Like, how many times have you said, man, Lord, I know you're good. Like, your word says you're good, but I just don't feel it right now.
Yeah.
You don't feel good right now. None of this. The amount of times personally that I've had to sit and just say those types of things, or, man, this just feels really unkind. This
Yeah.
calling you've placed on my life feels very unkind in this moment. You've placed me in this inescapable thing that I can't run from, and yet I don't see what's happening. I don't understand what you're doing. I you stand in somebody's living room after a student commits suicide and you go, this doesn't feel good. You said you're good. Where's this? How is this? How is this your goodness and kindness shown? And how do I lead through this? How do I lead this group through this, and this community through this, and these parents through this? Like, who am I to navigate this? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And he just continues to show himself faithful in ways that I don't expect.
And that's perfectly normal, by the way, to feel that way. To,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
no need to feel bad that you do. If you feel that way, that's entirely normal response all throughout Scripture. I see
Yes.
a lot of normal responses of people who are in difficult situations. The
Yep.
Psalms, I think, fleshes that out. I think there's all characters throughout the Bible who find themselves in difficult situations. So you're in good company if you're thinking that, or saying that, or your
Yeah.
complaints are coming to out of your mouth. Good news. Welcome.
Yeah,
the old,
we've been waiting.
we've
We've
been
been
waiting
waiting.
for you. The old adage used to be too that if I could talk you out of ministry, you probably don't belong.
Yeah,
And so if me and
yeah.
Jody could collectively share every story of every terrible, mean church
Mm,
person
hmm.
who's ever anything done, you may quit. You may decide, I'm not going to do that. That's horrible. Okay, that happened to you?
Yeah, of
Yes. Yes, that
course.
happened to us. Look at
Yeah,
us. Look at us.
we're.
We're damaged. Look at us. Look at
You
us.
think, like I said, you think this gray just happened on its own?
That's
Come on,
earned
man.
gray. That's earned gray, my friend.
Well, and the thing is, man, like this isn't for the faint of heart, and it never was. I want my life to matter. I want the ripples of my life to count for something. And for the first 11 years of ministry, I was bivocational. We say bivocational. I was working however many jobs it took to be a part-time youth pastor. That's what it meant.
Mhm.
And I'm really grateful for that because I worked some jobs I really enjoyed, but weren't fulfilling. And, at the end of the day, I always knew. I mean, I was a teen director at the YMCA for a while, years. And I was basically a youth pastor there. We were doing mission trips and we were doing camps, and it was the dream in many ways. I had hundreds of teens in our programs. I was leading staff of about 40 or 50 people across multiple programs, like multiple camps, and it was great. But I was also a part-time youth pastor. And every year they would say, "Hey, where do you see your career path?" And I would say, "I see it being a full-time youth pastor at this church." And then I quit that job and walked away from a full-time job with benefits because I just loved my students and I just felt torn.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
just knew that was what I was called to do, right? I mean, we'll figure it out. And here's the thing. My wife has equally felt called into this. And I think that's so significant. Like every step of the way, she has been an encourager in that. And, um, like this is what we were meant to do. We'll figure it out. And, you know, expectations matter though. I talk about it. I tell the story in the book. I won't tell it here, but, when I went full time for the first time, moved to Georgia, my marriage almost imploded. I just, and it was expectations were all over the place. And it was, we almost stopped before we got going. And I think having her alongside me to keep me in check and remind me has been a gift for sure.
hey, any youth pastor, I'm sure if it's not a chapter in there, we'll add the chapter. The part of staying power, if you're married, is having a wife that walks alongside of you through every
Yeah.
circumstance. Well, that will
Yeah.
help you. That will help you
Yeah.
stay.
Well, and there's a chapter on the it's not titled this, but I talk about this myth of balance, right? Because I think this derails a lot of people too. That we're just fighting for balance. How do you balance family and ministry? And I remember it being in Bible college in those early years, and people saying, "Man, whatever you do, don't put your family on the altar for ministry." That was said repeatedly. That, and go church plant. You don't have why deal with someone else's problems when you can start your own. And I just I just felt like such a weird statement to me. Like, what does that mean? Family on the altar for ministry? Like, I'm just a firm believer that when God calls you into ministry, your family's going to be a part of it. And there are seasons in your life, and this is where the healthy rhythms things come in. There's seasons in my life where my family really needs me more than my ministry, and if I don't recognize that, I'm going to lose them both. But there are also seasons where my ministry needs me more than my family, and I need to recognize that, and my family needs to recognize that, and I need to be able to lean into that as well. And if I'm fighting for balance, what will happen is in every moment where my family needs me more or my ministry needs me more, both lose. And at the end of the day, time and time and time again, what I've watched guys and girls step away from student ministry in that season for the sake of their family. And they walk away from what they felt so strongly called to.
Yep.
And we tend to justify that by saying, well, I'm called to my family first. I'm not even here to argue that. Okay, there's a long conversation about that, but I don't think it's one or the other. Like I don't see that in scripture where it's like this at the expense of that. I see no place in scripture where it says that. And you know, youth ministry is easy in that sense because we know summers are crazy. So okay, I'm gonna have camps. I'm gonna have all these things. But guess what? At like Thanksgiving, Christmas, bro, I'm chilling. So I better lean into my family because I'm not busy here because I know it's about to be busy again. Or before or after, I'm going to make sure I make time to be with my family beforehand or after, and and that's the way that is. And if I know, like when I knew my wife was pregnant and we're having a kid, my family's going to really need me, but we're not that yet. Yeah, no, we're not yet there. Okay, then I need to start preparing now so that my ministry can thrive still when I can't give the attention to it. Otherwise, yeah, gosh, you'll walk away. And calling won't be enough in that sense because you'll justify what you perceive to be one calling over another, and you separate it and say, no, 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 no. These are distinct callings that I have to manage. No, no, no. I don't believe that's true. That you were called to ministry and you have a family that you are called to minister to. Yes, that does not mean that one is at the expense of the other. It just means that sometimes one's going to need you more than the other.
Right. And you're not going to pull it off perfectly every time. These are
No,
steps you have to take. These are just things
yeah,
you have to consider, think of, plan ahead, all of those things. They're not going to happen perfectly. But let me ask this question. We'll end on this is if you had a time machine and you were able to
yeah,
put this book, Staying Power, and you sent it back to 18-year-old Jody Livingston, and Jody Livingston
yeah.
gets this in the mail somehow, and he's looking at it. What is 18-year-old Jody Livingston saying about this? What is he thinking about it?
I think well, he would have read it for sure because I didn't know anything else, right? I was reading everything I could get my hands on to learn and grow. I think there's some things in there he probably wouldn't believe. God, come on, that can't be true. Like, what are you talking about? I think I would have skipped some chapters, which would have been a mistake, because I thought 18-year-old me would have said, I got this part, like I don't need to do that. I think he would have appreciated the Nacho Libre quotes, although he wouldn't know what that is yet. Um, yeah, my hope is that he would be encouraged and that he would see in front of him a blueprint and a checklist to live out a lifetime of the calling that he feels so strongly called to. That's what I would hope he would find. And that's as I was writing it, that's what I was hoping. Man, what would I have thought? Would I have listened to this? I tried to be my hope, man, I hope so much that as folks read it, I believe it's the author's job to keep you engaged. It doesn't matter how helpful it is if it's boring. Okay. And I think preaching and reading boring, writing and preaching boring sermons and books is probably sinful somewhere in there. But I wanted it to be engaging. I wanted to infuse story into it, but I wanted it to be practical, not just philosophical and like these philosophical principles that you may or may not apply. I wanted it to apply to you if you are in a rural area with a very small church or an urban area with it, or if you're in a large church or multi-site or whatever denomination, whatever ethnic background, I wanted those principles to be true across the board. You'll notice that they're kind of divided into three parts. That first section really runs at your heart. It goes back to what you were asking earlier, Paul, about this idea of Jesus being at the center. I think once you get that, then we step into some pragmatic things of how to navigate and mention and that. And then on the back end, we kind of circle back to some things to consider. And then the conclusion, initially, it was a chapter, and it was called, the chapter everyone should read, but no one will. And I got outvoted a little bit on the publisher by that, and which makes sense, right? Like 10 chapters, 10 essentials. They let me keep it as the conclusion. And it's just, I think that's just some proverbial wisdom. I would put a lot of those, probably, if it were 18-year-old me, I'd take a lot of those and I'd stack them in a remember this file, a note. And then the appendix is 7 reasons you should leave your church. And I think those are equally important to consider, because maybe you're listening to this and you thought, that's great, but my church, really, you have no idea how bad it is right now. Okay, good. So then get the book, read it. Maybe you still think so. If you get to the end of the book and you still think you should leave, then here's 7 reasons that are legitimate reasons you should leave. Consider those, and then see where the Lord leads you. But yeah, I think I'm in a spot in life and ministry now where I just want to help youth pastors and youth ministers stay. I just want you to live out the calling. I want you to experience what it's like to be used by God over and over and over and over again for generation after generation, class after class after class, and see your group send their kids to your group, right? Like, hear of stories and watch them and grow and learn and be faithful and live a life of faithfulness. And I hope the book helps them do that. I believe it will. I do believe it will.
Well, I'm going to add Staying Power to my list of books that every youth pastor should read. So I'm going to add that there because I think it's important enough for youth pastors to be well read and to dig into those books and to get the wisdom that they need. I also think that that secretly you did in fact send this book to your 18-year-old self. I think it's very Back to the Future moment, and I think that's why maybe you're still here. Maybe that was be very
Yeah.
meta. It'd be very yeah. We'll have to make a movie on
Yeah.
that. But Jody, I appreciate you,
Hey, as long as I get a hoverboard.
man.
Yeah.
We
Although
can work that out.
44-year-old me would end up in the hospital, so
True.
maybe not.
I would as
Yeah.
well. I would as well. But Jody, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. And I hope those that are watching, those who are listening, all the links for all the books, the podcast, the Backpocket Games, all those things are going to be down in the description there in the show notes. I hope that you'll check it out because Jody's been around a little while. And so I think he's got some things to say, and I think he can help you. I think he can help you stay as long as you need to stay, as long as your heart is with the Lord, and as long as your heart is striving to do those things, that I think Jody's written some things down that are going to help you stay there and have that staying power. Jody, thank you for coming. Thanks for being a part today.
Amen. Thank you. Appreciate you. Love what you do. Love this podcast. Love the way you encourage youth pastors, and I love that we're doing it together, man.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, thanks again for watching. Here's a playlist with 79 other interviews you can watch, as well as a playlist for youth pastor advice that might be able to help you stay longer in youth ministry. But that's it for today, everyone. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.